Now we get into the talk story part of the evening, where we talk about Hawaiian culture, history, legend, language, healing, and the philosophy that we call Huna, based on 7 ideas about life. That the world is what you think it is, there are no limits, energy flows where attention goes, now is the moment of power. To love is to be happy with, all power comes from within, and effectiveness is the measure of truth. We talk about all these things in the way that I was brought up in this knowledge, and that's by question and answer. And your questions take us on a different journey every time we meet. And like I do sometimes, I answer a question before it's been asked, or it's actually been asked, but not particularly right this evening. So I'm going to start off with a little taste of Hawaiian culture in relationship to one particular thing. And I think what I'll do tonight is do this Hawaiian culture in relationship to the Proverbs that these islands have. There's a wonderful book about Proverbs that was written by one of the great Hawaiians who helped to preserve the culture, Mary Kavena Pukui. And she wrote a book that is full of Hawaiian, thousands, literally, of Hawaiian proverbs that she gathered together. Since, in a lot of the reading that I've done, I know that there's more from other Hawaiian sources that didn't get into that book, but she did the biggest collection of it. Hawaiians used a lot of proverbs for many different purposes. And what I decided to do tonight is tell you some of the proverbs that describe the 7 principles that I talk about. Because these 7 principles, I always mention them in English, and yet they come out of Hawaiian culture. And even though not every family will use the wording or the names or those certain special names that we give them in my family's tradition, the concepts are out there in the culture and in the society. So there are 7 of these. We have one of them, which is the first, related to the first principle. And so I'll show you this and hold it up. This is the one that we have, which is big enough to see. This is Aole Pau, Aohe Pau. Okay, Aohe Pau Ka'ike, Ika Halau Ho'okahi. And I want you to think about that for a few minutes, okay? If you know Hawaiian, you can do that. Otherwise, the first principle of Huna says, the world is what you think it is. What this proverb says literally is, all knowledge is not taught in one school. Which means there are many different ways and many different approaches to knowledge, that many different teachers have a different idea about knowledge and about the things that they want to present, because everybody thinks differently about different things. The world is what you think it is, or the world is what this teacher says it is, or the world is what that teacher says it is. And this proverb reminds us that there are all these different points of view. Okay? So same concept here. I'm going to go down the list. I have on another one. This can't show it up very much. This says Hawaiian philosophy, proverbs, and principles. The second principle says there are no limits. And put into one form of Hawaiian, it says Aohe pu'uki e ki'e ke ho'oa'o ia api'i. And what that means is no cliff is so tall that it cannot be climbed. The same concept put into a very graphic image, right, of that, doesn't matter how high the cliff is, it can be climbed. There are no limits. Another one here, this is going to take a little thinking, but we have one that says energy flows where attention goes. Nice phrasing in English. But one of the Hawaiian ways of saying this is ulu kahoi. Now, one of the things that the Hawaiians loved is wordplay. So sometimes you have to realize that things are being said with wordplay, because what this literally says is the sweet potato vine grows. That's nice. What's that got to do with anything? How can that be a proverb? But you see, it's a play on the word ulu and a play on the word hoi. Because ulu means to grow, but it also means to increase. And it also means to inspire. And the hoi, if you double the word, hoi hoi, one of the meanings of that is interest. So what is growing is interest in the direction of the vine. Okay? So it says also the sweet potato vine is growing, but it also says interest is growing in a particular direction. And that's related to this idea that energy flows where attention goes. We have one which is supposed to be a fairly modern proverb, maybe in the 1700s, but this is wela kahau. And what it really means is strike while the iron is hot. That's what it means. Hau is a Hawaiian word for iron. And in the early days when they were having they had blacksmiths actually from China. They had blacksmiths from China that visited the Hawaiian Islands in the 1700s, the early part of the 1700s. And so blacksmiths came here to work as things went on, and there was a lot of iron work done. And so the Hawaiians, who were their apprentices at blacksmithing, learned this idea that you have to strike while the iron is hot. And it means, just like what that means in English, do it now. The proverb is, now is the moment of power. Now is the moment to act. The proverb that says, to love is to be happy with, which gives some people some problems because they don't really understand love. This is a Hawaiian point of view of love. Comes from the word aloha. But as a proverb, we have one here that says, he olina leo, ka ke aloha. And the translation is, joy is in the voice of love. Okay? And that carries out that idea that when we're talking about love, we're talking about the happy part of any relationship. We have one that says all power comes from within. That's one of the Huna principles. As a proverb, I like this one, aya no ikamea e meleana. And this means let the singer select the song. And it carries that whole idea, not just as a singer, but let the person who's doing the thing make the choices, is really what it comes down to. The power comes from within. And finally, the last principle, one that gives most people most problems, effectiveness is the measure of truth. What matters is what works. What this says is, Ike ia no kalowea, ike kuaha. And the meaning as a proverb is, an expert is recognized by the altar that he builds. Right? Effectiveness is the measure of truth. So we find these are just a few proverbs that carry those same concepts. And this is just to show these are an intrinsic part of Hawaiian culture.